I was sipping my coffee when I saw Karen sprinting across the lawn, clutching a small brown package like she'd just won the lottery. What she didn't know? That box had an FBI tracker inside, and her every move was now being watched. I didn't call the feds. They were already on their way, and while she thought she was exposing suspicious packages, she was walking straight into a federal sting. Now you're probably wondering, how does something this crazy even happen in a quiet HOA neighborhood? Well, it all started with a missing Amazon box and a neighborhood meeting from hell. I didn't think much of it the first time. I got the notification on my phone. Your Amazon delivery has arrived. I was working from home, sipping coffee in the kitchen, so I casually walked to the front door expecting to grab my usual order of multivitamins and dog treats. But when I opened the door, there was nothing there. No box, no trace of the delivery driver. Just an empty porch and the wind fluttering through the trees like nothing had happened. I even double-checked the side entrance and the garage door, thinking maybe the driver had left it somewhere else. Still nothing. I pulled up my security camera feed, and sure enough, there it was, clear as day. The delivery guy dropping off the package right on my welcome mat. Time-stamped. 15 minutes before I checked. I squinted at the video, rewound, fast-forwarded. But no one else appeared on camera. It was just gone. At first, I blamed it on a glitch. Maybe the delivery guy scanned it and then took it back with him by mistake. Or maybe someone genuinely thought it was their package and picked it up by accident. I mean, it happens, right? One-off mistakes. I decided to let it slide. But then, it happened again. This time, it was a larger package, something I'd been really looking forward to. A set of custom tools I ordered for a project I was working on. Expensive stuff, same process. Notification buzzes. I head to the front door. Empty porch. Not even a smudge on the mat. I immediately check the camera footage, and again, clear delivery. The driver drops it off. Leaves. Less than 10 minutes later, poof. It's like the box teleported. Now I'm irritated. I double-check with my neighbors. I walk over to the house next door and ask politely if maybe they picked up a package by accident. Both of them deny it. One of them even laughs and says, "You sure you're not just forgetting you brought it in?" I wasn't. By the third time, I'm no longer confused. I'm angry. It was a small box this time, but I intentionally ordered something cheap and inconspicuous just to test a theory. I had it delivered during the day when I knew I'd be home. Within 5 minutes of the notification, I was at the door, and still, it was gone. Not a trace. I scanned the entire front yard, even checked the bushes in case some punk kid thought it'd be funny to hide it. Nada. So I posted in the HOA group chat. I worded it nicely. "Hey neighbors, I've had a few packages go missing recently. Just checking in. Has anyone else experienced this? Maybe we've got a porch pirate on the loose." I figured at least a few people would respond. Maybe someone would chime in with a Ring video or a tip. But nope, nothing. Crickets. Except for Karen. Karen, of course. She didn't message me directly, no. Instead, she posted a smug little paragraph in the public thread. Some residents might want to consider installing better security systems or picking up their deliveries faster. Just saying. No concern, no empathy, just her trademark passive-aggressive tone that made you want to roll your eyes out of your skull. I stared at her comment, hands frozen over the keyboard, unsure whether to fire back or ignore her. I chose to let it go, for now. But here's the thing. Karen lived directly across the street. Her front window had a perfect view of my porch. Every time I left the house, she was there, peeking through her curtains like some kind of suburban gargoyle. She always found reasons to involve herself in other people's business. Lawn too tall? Karen would report it. Trash cans left out a few extra hours? Karen would snap a photo and email it to the HOA board. And now, with my packages disappearing like clockwork and Karen making thinly veiled jabs online, my suspicion had a very specific target. I just didn't have proof. Yet. I started jotting down notes, dates, times, what was stolen. I checked the timestamps on my Ring camera again and again. I even started parking a little differently in my driveway so the camera angle would widen. I told my wife not to say anything. If someone was watching us, I didn't want to tip them off that we were on to them. The strangest part? Karen had a package on her porch every other day. She never seemed to have delivery issues. Not once. And I'd never seen her actually get them. They'd just be there. Like they materialized from thin air. That's when the thought hit me. What if she wasn't just watching the neighborhood? What if she was helping herself to anything that looked interesting? The next day, I went online and ordered another package. Only this time, it wasn't something I actually needed. I had a different purpose in mind, one that would finally settle my suspicions. Because if Karen really was the one stealing from me, I was going to catch her in the act. And this time, it wouldn't be just a lost box and some vague suspicion. It would be undeniable. And the moment she touched that box, she wouldn't just be stealing from a neighbor. She'd be walking straight into a federal trap. I knew I needed more than a gut feeling. My suspicion alone wouldn't hold up, not with the HOA, not with the police, and definitely not if I wanted to confront Karen. She was the kind of person who thrived on deniability, someone who'd smirk and say, "You really think I'd do something like that?" while hiding the evidence under her own roof. So I decided to play it smart. If I wanted to expose her, I had to catch her red-handed. No room for doubt. First step, I upgraded my security system. The basic Ring camera wasn't cutting it, not with whatever trick Karen was pulling. I went out and got motion-activated, high-definition cameras with night vision and wide-angle lenses. I installed them myself. One tucked neatly under the eaves, another facing the side of the house, and a final one angled to capture the street from the corner of my garage. This wasn't just for package theft anymore. This was surveillance. This was a sting. And then I waited. 2 days later, I ordered another test package, something light and unassuming. I picked an item I didn't care about losing, a random kitchen gadget I found on sale. The kind of thing that would arrive in a small brown box with no branding or markings to suggest it wasn't valuable. It was the perfect bait. I had it delivered on a Wednesday afternoon, right around the time Karen usually watered her front lawn, or more accurately, stood in her driveway with a hose while pretending not to watch the entire block. The notification pinged at 2:17 p.m. My phone buzzed. "Your Amazon order has arrived." I didn't move. I just watched the live camera feed from my phone. The delivery guy dropped the package off and left. I saw it sitting there, clear as day, right on the doormat. And then, 5 minutes later, movement. A figure entered the frame, fast and low. Hoodie up, head ducked. I tapped to zoom in. It was hard to see details, just a blur of motion and fabric. But there was something familiar about it. The way they moved, quick but cautious, looking left and right as if they knew where the blind spots were. But this time, I had no blind spots. The figure bent down, snatched the package, and darted out of frame. It happened in less than 3 seconds. Clean, professional, like they'd done it before. I replayed the footage, slowing it down, frame by frame. That gait, that subtle limp in the left leg, that bulky keychain clipped to their belt loop. It jingled for a split second. I'd seen that keychain before. HOA meeting. Front row. Karen's hip always had that same set of keys dangling from her waist, like she was the gatekeeper of the entire subdivision. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt it. This was it. I had my thief. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. I didn't want to believe it, but everything pointed in the same direction. Karen. Of course, she'd thought the hoodie would conceal her identity. She probably assumed my camera only faced the porch. She didn't know I had side views, backup angles, zoom footage. I even caught the corner of her license plate as she cut back through the side alley leading to her garage. Every move was on record. But I didn't rush to accuse her. Not yet. I needed her to take the bait one more time. because the next box wasn't going to contain some useless gadget. The next one was going to be something very, very different. That night, I did some research. I found a company online that sold decoy bait boxes, designed to look like real packages, but built with tracking tech, motion sensors, even interior cameras. They were originally made for catching porch pirates in high-theft areas. Some of them came with exploding glitter bombs or sirens. Others were more discreet, logging GPS coordinates in real time. I ordered the best one they had, top of the line, tamper-proof, and pre-wired to send alerts to my phone the second it moved. But that wasn't enough. I wanted a legal angle. I wanted to go beyond just proving she stole something. So I talked to a friend who worked in pharmaceuticals. I asked a few careful questions, keeping it vague. That's when the idea really came together. What if the next package looked like it contained prescription medication, federally controlled substances, not actual drugs, of course, that would be a legal minefield, but something that looked real, official packaging, fake pharmacy labels, the whole 9 yards. It would be enough to suggest tampering with federally monitored mail, enough to get the authorities' attention. It was bold, risky. But after weeks of being treated like a fool, after being gaslit and mocked in public forums, I was done playing games. Karen had made herself the self-appointed watchdog of the neighborhood. Now she was about to find out what it felt like to have the real authorities breathing down her neck. The stage was set. The cameras were live. The trap was ready. All I had to do was wait. The plan had to be perfect. No room for error. If I was going to bring Karen down, legally, publicly, and without a shadow of a doubt, I needed everything aligned. That meant tech, timing, and the backing of someone who could make it all official. That's where my old friend Mark came in. We went to college together, and now he worked in federal law enforcement, mostly handling mail fraud and package theft cases. I didn't want to drag him into neighborhood drama at first, but when I showed him the footage of the theft and explained the pattern, he leaned forward and said something that lit a fire under me. "You know, we've got a bait box program just for people like this." I was stunned. Apparently, there was a federal initiative, quiet, low-key, but growing in popularity. They'd place fake packages, rigged with tracking devices and other tools, on porches in areas with high theft reports. It wasn't meant for HOA feuds, but it was meant for catching serial offenders who thought they were smarter than the system. I told Mark everything. He listened carefully, reviewed the footage himself, and asked a few sharp questions. Was this a repeat incident? Was there any previous report of Karen stealing other people's deliveries? I admitted I hadn't gone that far, but word around the neighborhood suggested I wasn't her only target. He didn't promise anything, but a few days later he called and said the department had agreed to help. They couldn't launch a full investigation on hearsay, but they could allow me to place a test package on my porch, one that looked like it contained prescription medication, fitted with a GPS chip, a motion alert, and a dye pack inside. I couldn't believe it. This was real. This was happening. The next morning, a plain brown box arrived at my door. Nothing fancy, just the usual shipping label, a fake return address from a pharmacy, and a red and white sticker warning that the contents were temperature sensitive. Inside the box, a foam cooler with a dummy pill bottle, some fake paperwork, and the dye pack hidden beneath a false bottom. There was also a tracker, barely bigger than a penny, set to ping my phone the moment the box was disturbed. I placed it carefully on the porch, just like any other delivery. Then I went inside, locked the door, and opened the live feed from my security cameras. Every angle was ready. The bait was set. I waited. The first hour passed. Nothing. A car drove by. A dog barked in the distance. Karen's garage door opened, then shut again. No movement on the porch. Then, at exactly 2:38 p.m., it happened. A blur of motion. A hoodie, again. Low to the ground, face hidden. The figure moved fast, grabbed the box in one clean swoop, and sprinted out of frame. My phone lit up immediately. package in motion. The GPS began tracking its route, straight down the sidewalk, through the hedge between our properties, and into Karen's backyard. I watched the dot move in real time. It stopped at her side door. Then, nothing. I switched to the side camera. Karen. She stepped into view with the box in her hands, peeling back the tape. She didn't look rushed or panicked, just curious, arrogant, like she owned whatever she took, like the rules didn't apply to her. And then, boom. A red cloud exploded in her face. The dye pack blew straight up into her chest, arms, and neck. She jumped, flailing, tossing the box away as if it had bitten her. Red mist coated her hands, her driveway, the edge of her garage. She screamed something I couldn't hear through the glass. Then she bolted back inside. I couldn't stop laughing. I watched the replay 3 times. But this wasn't just for laughs. I had the footage, the GPS data, the timestamp, her face covered in dye, her prints on the fake prescription paperwork. It was all lined up, bulletproof. I sent everything to Mark that night. He called me back with a grin in his voice. "We've got enough." I asked him what that meant. He said Karen might not go to jail, it wasn't guaranteed, but she'd definitely be facing a federal investigation for tampering with what she believed was controlled medication, mail theft, mail fraud, interference with federal delivery. They could stack the charges if she resisted. Best case, she'd be slapped with fines and a restraining order. Worst case, a felony on her record. The fallout was about to begin. Karen didn't know it yet, but her little porch piracy hobby had just opened the gates to a full-on federal nightmare. And I had front-row seats. It happened faster than I expected. After I sent the footage and tracking data to Mark, he said to stay ready, that they wouldn't give me a heads up for operational reasons, but I'd know when it went down. I kept my phone near me like a lifeline, security cameras running, and every curtain slightly cracked. I wasn't just waiting for karma anymore. I was waiting for justice. 2 days later, around midday, I noticed something strange. My phone pinged with a proximity alert from the GPS chip still lodged inside the bait package. The signal had moved again, only a few feet, but enough to trigger the system. Karen had touched it. Within 20 minutes, 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled down our street and parked just past my driveway. They looked like regular suburban family vehicles, if you ignored the tinted windows and the fact that no one got out right away. I recognized the pattern from what Mark told me: slow, silent, and surgical. Federal agents never kicked in doors like in the movies. They knocked and waited for you to hang yourself. I watched from the front room, heart hammering. Then I saw her, Karen. She opened the door with the most confused, slightly smug expression, still wearing her usual sun visor like this was just another day she'd be meddling in someone else's business. She was holding the bait package, still. It was open, but she hadn't thrown it out. Maybe she'd planned to repack it, return it to someone, or claim she found it abandoned. Who knows? Karen always believed she was smarter than everyone else. She'd probably cooked up some elaborate speech in her head about how she rescued it from potential porch pirates and deserved a thank you. But that fantasy dissolved the moment one of the agents showed her his badge. She stepped back, visibly stunned. I couldn't hear the words, but her body language said everything. Her hands flew up. She looked down at the box. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, like she was glitching in real time. The second she tried to push the door shut, the agents moved. They stepped forward, firm, calm, but fast. One placed a foot in the doorway. The other gently took the box from her hands. Karen tried to pull away, but it was already over. One agent took her arm. She started yelling, pointing in my direction, then toward her garage, probably grasping for an excuse. Maybe she thought blaming me would fix it. But there's no spin for getting caught red-handed with a tracked package that had already been flagged for federal investigation. She was read her rights right there on her front porch. Neighbors had started to gather. Cars slowed down. People peeked through blinds. Karen's daughter stepped outside, stunned, and was told to go back inside immediately. Karen's face twisted, part fury, part confusion, part disbelief. I stepped back from the window just as she was led to the SUV, hands cuffed behind her back. Mark called me an hour later. "They got what they needed," he said. "She's in custody." He explained that after I'd sent the footage and data, they opened a quick internal case. It turned out Karen wasn't just a one-time offender. She had a history of intervening with packages in the neighborhood. Several complaints had been filed but never proven. She'd even spoken at HOA meetings about how we should screen deliveries for dangerous content. That memo on the mailboxes? Apparently, it was part of a larger stunt she tried to push, encouraging people to report or even hold suspicious deliveries until they were verified. She framed it like a neighborhood safety program, but the feds saw it for what it really was: theft, tampering, and obstruction. Mark told me that her actions, especially tampering with what she believed to be a controlled prescription, ticked several legal boxes. Even though the pill bottle was fake, the law didn't care about what was real. It cared about what she thought she was stealing. She was being charged with mail theft, tampering with federal property, and obstruction of a law enforcement operation. I couldn't stop smiling. I hadn't touched her mailbox. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't retaliated with pettiness or vandalism. I simply watched, documented, and played by the book. And now Karen was sitting in a holding cell trying to explain how her neighborhood watchdog act had turned into a federal offense. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came a few days later, when the HOA president, Mr. We Don't Get Involved in Personal Disputes, showed up at my door with a very different tone. He asked if I'd be willing to speak at the next board meeting. He wanted to open a discussion about improving package security in the neighborhood. I agreed, politely. But in my head, all I could hear was Karen screaming on her porch, "I didn't know it was a felony." She knew now, and so did everyone else. The HOA scrambled faster than I thought possible. Within 2 days of Karen's arrest, every mailbox on the street had a new notice duct taped to it. This time, not smug or self-important, just panicked. Emergency HOA meeting. Attendance mandatory. It was the first time in years they'd called one of these outside of the regular quarterly schedule. That alone told me they weren't doing this out of good faith. They were trying to save face. The clubhouse was packed. People who hadn't shown up in 5 years were sitting in folding chairs, whispering and side-eyeing one another. No snacks, no warm welcomes, no HOA-branded water bottles. Just silence, tension, and the unmistakable thrum of chaos, barely held together by PR tape. The president of the HOA, Richard, Mr. "This is outside our jurisdiction," looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usual overly rehearsed smile was gone, replaced by something twitchy and desperate. He called the meeting to order, but his voice cracked halfway through his opening remarks. You could feel the room ready to devour him. Then it began. Neighbors started asking questions, loud ones. Why wasn't Karen's behavior addressed earlier? What did the HOA know, and when did they know it? Did anyone approve her bizarre package watch initiative? Why were those ridiculous memos allowed to be circulated under the HOA's name? At first, Richard stammered. He insisted Karen had been acting independently, that she may have misunderstood the limits of her role. He said the board never authorized her to collect packages, only to raise awareness. But people weren't buying it. The FBI report had leaked online, not in full, but enough to prove that Karen had submitted multiple emails to the HOA claiming to intercept and secure deliveries that posed a threat. Intercept. Secure. That language didn't come from nowhere. Someone on the board had seen those emails, and instead of stopping her, they let it slide, or worse, silently agreed with her. Then came the moment everything cracked wide open. One of the neighbors, a quiet guy named Adam, who usually kept to himself, stood up and said something that made the entire room go still. Karen bragged to me that she had access to the HOA's internal complaint system. She said she could see flagged houses before anything was voted on. She said it helped her know who was worth keeping an eye on. That broke the dam. Suddenly, everyone had a story. Karen had warned people not to leave packages unattended. She'd made veiled comments at board meetings about neighbors getting suspicious deliveries. Someone claimed she once told them, "If the HOA won't handle it, I will." Another said, Karen boasted that the board trusted her instincts more than most members. All eyes turned to Richard. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He knew. Of course he knew. The others on the board, the ones who had always nodded along while Karen ranted, sank lower in their chairs, faces pale. And then came the final blow. A woman named Beth, one of the longest residing neighbors, stood up and read aloud a quote from an email Karen had sent to the board. "Certain houses are repeat offenders. I'll continue discreet surveillance. If anything looks dangerous, I'll remove it and report later." The room exploded. Discreet surveillance. Remove and report later. It sounded less like a neighbor trying to help and more like a rogue cop on a power trip. And the HOA had the nerve to pretend it was all a misunderstanding? People were furious. One neighbor shouted that they wanted to file a class action against the HOA for negligence. Another demanded Richard resign immediately. Someone else suggested disbanding the entire board and starting from scratch. By the time the yelling died down, 3 members of the HOA board had already stood up, announced their resignations, and walked out without a word. Richard didn't resign that night, but he didn't look like a man who had a future left in this neighborhood either. The meeting officially ended in chaos. People were still talking in small clusters outside the building for over an hour. Whispers floated through the air about what else Karen had done, who else might have been involved, and how the HOA let one woman turn an entire community into her own personal surveillance state. For the first time, I realized that Karen hadn't just been a nosy neighbor. She had been a symptom of something worse, a culture that encouraged power-hungry people to enforce rules they barely understood, an environment where concern was weaponized and safety was an excuse to control. And now that it had all come out, on paper, on camera, in public, there was no stuffing it back in the box. Fallout wasn't the right word. This wasn't fallout. This was demolition, and the foundation was rotten from the start. In the days following the chaotic HOA meeting, things moved fast. Too fast for anyone on the board to keep their grip on the narrative. The FBI investigation into Karen's actions continued, and while I wasn't privy to all the legal details, I didn't have to be. The truth had already blown the lid off the neighborhood. A week later, I received a letter. It was official HOA letterhead, though noticeably redesigned, as if they were desperate to start fresh. Inside, a typed formal apology, signed by the interim HOA president. Apparently, Richard had stepped down for personal reasons, but everyone knew it was because the pressure finally cracked him. The letter was short, stiff, and loaded with liability evasion language, but one sentence stood out. "We regret the events that led to the mishandling of your private property and the subsequent legal escalation." Mishandling. That's what they were calling it. Still, I kept the letter. Not because I needed their words, but because it was proof. Proof that they knew they'd crossed a line. Proof that silence had consequences. But the biggest shift wasn't in paperwork. It was in the people. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves started talking more, checking in, asking questions instead of making assumptions. One woman down the street installed a Ring doorbell, then offered to help older residents do the same. Another neighbor, who had lived here for over a decade without ever attending an HOA meeting, volunteered to join the new board. Not to gain power, to ensure no one like Karen ever slipped through again. The atmosphere felt lighter, less suspicious, less paranoid. Maybe because the worst had already happened and dragged everyone into the light. Karen, unsurprisingly, didn't return to the neighborhood. Last I heard, her house was being prepped for sale by her distant cousin, someone who apparently wanted no part of her mess. There was talk about her facing felony charges, but I didn't follow the case closely. It didn't matter anymore. She was gone. Not just from the street, but from every window, every shadow, every creeping corner where her presence used to linger like a chill. And with her absence came something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Packages arrived without incident. No strange notes, no concerned neighbor memos taped to my mailbox. Just quiet deliveries, left right where they belonged. I could open my blinds without wondering who might be staring back. I could take a walk without the feeling that someone was cataloging my every move. It wasn't just that she was gone, it was that the illusion had been shattered. Everyone now knew what unchecked power looked like in its most absurd suburban form. And they'd seen what happened when someone dared to stand up to it, when someone pushed back not with noise, but with truth. I also realized something else in the quiet aftermath. Karen hadn't just been trying to control packages, she had been trying to control fear. She leveraged the idea that danger could be lurking in plain cardboard, that appearances mattered more than facts, that paranoia equaled vigilance. And some people bought it. Not because they were evil, but because fear is easy. Accountability is hard. But now the neighborhood had been given a crash course in the cost of complicity, and no one wanted to pay that price again. I kept the bait box, too. It's locked away in my closet. Empty now, no longer broadcasting any signal. Just a plastic cube with a hidden tracker, a fake prescription label, and a very real history. It reminds me that the smallest package can carry the biggest fallout. That sometimes justice comes wrapped in something deceptively ordinary. And I don't care how petty it sounds, but every time I open my front door and see my latest delivery sitting untouched, right where it's supposed to be, I smile. Not because I got revenge, but because I got clarity. Karen thought she could steal with impunity. She thought her concern made her righteous. She thought no one would challenge her because the rules were on her side. But rules can be broken. And when you cross a federal line, the rules become irrelevant. This wasn't just about a stolen package. This was about power, perception, and the illusion of authority. Karen wasn't a one-off. She was a warning. And here's mine. If you ever find yourself in a community where one neighbor starts acting like a cop, judge, and jury, don't wait for the sirens. Don't wait for someone to get hurt. Don't assume that silence is safer, because sometimes the biggest crimes start with the smallest excuses, and the people smiling at your doorstep might be planning your downfall. Karen learned that the hard way, and the rest of the neighborhood will never forget it. If you thought this story was wild, trust me, there's a whole lot more where that came from. HOA drama, unhinged neighbors, insane revenge stories. You won't believe what people go through just to protect their homes. So if you're hooked, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a jaw-dropping moment. This is the HOA Stories, where the suburbs get savage.